Welcome to Sport Media and Tech. I am Keel Blake, and on this episode, I have the opportunity to speak with co-founder and CEO of Team Genius, Chris Knutson. We discuss athlete development tech, entrepreneurship, lessons of leadership, and the future of their business.
Starting at the beginning, I really wanted to be in startups or entrepreneurship. That was kind of my calling, I guess, in a way. In college, I took my first entrepreneurship class and was like, hey, this is what I want to do. Just the idea of building something and kind of being, the ultimate businessman in a way. And I did the obvious thing and I joined a Fortune 500 company after that and kind of went in and got some experience, kind of the opposite of a startup. And I kind of fell into the sports side of things. I started looking around at opportunities, ideas, never really had that perfect idea of my own that I wanted to pursue, but I thought maybe I could find a developer with an idea that needed a business person to partner with. And sure enough, that's what I did. I actually met my co-founder, Todd, through like an online matchmaking site for startup founders. And I sent him a message. He got back to me and we grabbed a beer the next day, showed me the product. And I said, hey, this, sports, SaaS, like this checks a lot of the boxes for what I'm interested in. And we were kind of, got after it after that. So, I didn't necessarily pursue sports specifically, but when an opportunity to kind of, build a career in sports presented itself, I was very excited about that, just given, being a fan and playing sports growing up.
Yeah, I think that's really interesting, Chris. You shared that, this wasn't necessarily your specific idea. You were interested in entrepreneurship, but you went and found someone where you could go and support them with your own unique skill sets. And so that's something a lot of people I don't think about, is that they can be entrepreneurial without having the idea and still go be a part of an idea and support that. So, but what was it about entrepreneurship that was so attractive to you personally?
Yeah, I think, kind of like I said, that sort of just the challenge of sort of figuring out all aspects of the business. I had taken accounting classes and marketing classes and all those things in school, but what really drew me to entrepreneurship was, we would do case study learning. So, here's a startup, read a few pages about their story. And this is a real life scenario. And, they were really struggling with X, and here's some data, here's some information. What would you do? And then you debate it, as a class. And I think when I took my first class there, that really just kind of hooked me as like, these are the problems that I want to solve, the ones that really combine all functions of the business into, moving forward and making progress. And once I kind of experienced that, even in the classroom setting, I was kind of hooked on the idea.
Yeah. You strike me as someone that's curious and you love learning and you wanted to overcome those challenges. So why did you pick now sports and amateur athletics? Because there are a lot of challenges there, and there's a lot of other areas you could have gone into in entrepreneurship. So why sports?
Yeah. Yeah. I think sports, often people assume, hey, sports, that's so cool. And it is, right? There's a lot of awesome things about it. But, particularly on the amateur, the youth sports side, I mean, it's a tough market. It's very fragmented, right? There's just tens of thousands of small organizations in the space. So you can't just go land a whale and build your whole business around that. You got to, it's piece by piece, brick by brick to build anything meaningful. And you're also in many cases selling to volunteers and volunteer-run organizations, which is has its own challenge, right? We're selling to people or working with people that have, a day job, and managing a sports club or being a coach or something is just something they do on the side. So it's hard to get their attention. Yeah. All that said, it's an area to make a huge impact. There's so much opportunity. There's a lot of problems in youth sports. And we all look back to the way, we all know the stories about how sports shape kids for the better, and they learn, perseverance and teamwork and, just working hard at something and getting better at all of those things that are really good. And, you start looking at where can you make a big impact on the future, and sports and in particularly amateur sports is really exciting. And there's just, so many kids, there's such a volume of kids that you can impact with a solution there. That's really exciting. And, lastly, I'll say on that, I of course didn't know this at the time when I kind of moved into this market, but one thing that we've seen that I think is really interesting and kind of a a reason to be excited about, tech and companies in youth is that you start to think about, why would these people be volunteers? And 9 times out of 10, it's because they have a kid in the program. And so naturally, you have sort of this demographic trend that's happening where, I have a 15-month-old son, my first kid, and when he gets to playing sports, there's a good chance I'm going to be involved. Well, I've spent the vast majority of my life with a phone in my pocket. And so, my default behavior is there's got to be an app that makes this easier. There's got to be a tool for this. It's not to, print out paper and, spend my evenings and weekends doing manual, data entry work. So there's a lot of trends sort of supporting, some innovation in youth sports, which is exciting.
Yeah. So Chris, I'm going to ask you to be very open and honest with us. So which sport are you subconsciously trying to inject into your son's life as a child now? Is it a plush basketball, a plush hockey puck? You're in Minnesota up there, so it might be an ice sport. But we'll see. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm concerned about the cost of playing hockey, despite, maybe some pond hockey. That sounds fun. That's what I did. But no, I think, certainly open to any of them. But yes, if I had to sort of choose a little bit, I never played soccer in any sort of competitive setting. And I think that's an interesting one. I played a lot of basketball, so I would imagine him and I will be shooting a lot of hoops. And if he wants to go that direction, that's great. And then my wife and I both have started to kind of think, lifetime sports are really good, golf, tennis, kind of want to start him young with those ones. And so he's got his own putter and he likes to play with that. Yeah,
that's awesome. That's the beauty of sports, right? It's something that you pick up when you're young, playing as an amateur. Some people move on to play collegiately, play professionally, but others move on to play for the rest of their life in a social environment or with their family and friends and build great memories. And so I recently went up, Chris, to Michigan to visit with some family and spend some time. And I used to teach tennis growing up. And so a family that I used to teach their kids, they were 12, 10, and 5. I hadn't seen them in 14 years. And so now, or 13 or 14 years or so. So now the 5-year-old is 18 going to college. We all had dinner out one night and I'm asking all of them their updates. And she says, I want to coach professionally and be a general manager, of a sports team. How would you explain what Team Genius is to her and why she needs to use that for her athletes as she's becoming a coach?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a great question. And there's, this answer, of course, evolves over time. But, really we focus on player evaluations. And that's sort of the broad category for, collecting performance data on players and making decisions from it. And so the original use case, and I'm sure we can, kind of talk more about the genesis story, but, the original use case for our app or the problem we set out to solve was youth sports tryouts. It's, you're a soccer club or, even certainly we have golf and tennis and figure skating and everything. And, you have maybe hundreds of kids showing up over a couple of weekends. And traditionally that process is managed using paper and spreadsheets. And so there's a lot of, manual data entry, trying to read people's handwriting, or maybe the paper form got rained on and smudged, and now you're trying to put it into a spreadsheet. And that's ultimately going to be used to decide if that kid plays on this team or that team. And a lot of times the problem with, it sounds, it's inefficient, that's terrible, but, whatever. Well, ultimately, why do kids quit sports, right? A lot of times it's because they're not having fun anymore, right? Well, what makes it fun? You want to play on teams where, you're challenged. You don't want to be the worst kid on the team. You don't want the team to lose every game. And conversely, that can go the other way too. The team, where they're just so much better than everyone else and they're not really challenged in that way. So I think this idea of giving people the tools to not only make that process more efficient, but make better decisions, really be able to compare players with accurate data, put them on the right teams. And then that becomes the foundation for coach feedback during the year and player development tracking. So you can see how those skills are improving over time.
Yeah. So Chris, I'm going to let you and everybody else in on a little secret here. So I got cut junior year for varsity basketball. Didn't give up at that point. I kept playing. I went out and I was in Detroit area. So I played at Joe Dumars Fieldhouse, went in, played got on to the local AAU team with the star player to prove that I could play. Got back, played senior year. Then from there, I will say I was not the Michael Jordan story, but that's okay. That's okay. I learned a lot. I personally grew, became a practice player in college. And that's why I love sports still to this day, is because of that growth and the relationships, but and the coaches, right? The coaches that have an influence on athletes' lives in such a positive way. But where I'm honing in on is, how does your software help maintain a relationship between athletes and coaches and opportunities, even if this year they weren't good enough?
Yeah, that's a great question. And a lot of times, it's just the idea that largely that data has been inaccessible in the past. So you can imagine all the bias and the politics and everything around this process, right? Oh, you ruined my 9-year-old's chances of their college scholarship because you put her on the B team,
killer.
right? Like,
you're a dream killer. Yeah,
it's exactly. So now, these organizations, coaches and the administrators alike, have this data at their fingertips, and they can say, hey, mom and dad, I know this is disappointing. You made, your daughter or son made the B team this year, B team. And, but here's what we can do, right? Look, she was really close on this skill. This is really the one thing that kind of held her back. She's an awesome player in this area. Keep that up. It becomes a positive conversation instead of you got cut. And it's, without data, without a process, you as a parent, you're naturally kind of assuming, well, maybe some funny business was going on. Maybe they cut her because such and such's dad is a coach on this other team, and that kind of thing. And so if you have that foundation of good, clean data presented professionally, the conversation just totally changes to becoming a positive one. And then over time, as I mentioned, that data is now, it's in a database, it's accessible. I mean, we have, 11 million data points on 300,000 kids. And we can start to use that to help those kids see their improvement over time. And so then, maybe they made the B team now, but then, they get evaluated from their coach. They get a nice feedback report or report card in the middle of the season, and then the end of the season. And let's say that end of the season one also includes, hey, here's some things you can work on over the summer if you want to, come out and try to make the A team again next year. Yeah. And it just it becomes a proactive, here's where you're at. Here's what we can do. Here's the next thing. And that player now knows where they stand and what they need to do to get there, versus just this, like, you didn't make it tough. And it's just a totally different thing.
Yeah. That seems like a game changer, because you mentioned earlier, there's a little bit of a drop off of, players in amateur sports sometimes. And so this is a way to keep players engaged and say you can learn and develop and make the team. But, you are leveraging technology to make this all possible. So who's all involved in this ecosystem? Who are your customers? And then who's all using this software within amateur sports?
Yeah. So the app itself has a couple of different users. Kind of think of this sort of hierarchy of you have the administrators, the executives at the organization, then you have the coaches, and then you have the parents and the players. And not a hierarchy in terms of importance, but just in sort of a workflow. And so we typically go in, and the person who buys it is usually the administration. It might be an executive director. In soccer, it might be the director of coaching, someone who sort of manages maybe 25 teams or kind of oversees the club. And so that person would typically buy it. And a lot of our power is actually in the back end of the system. So it's kind of the administration tools where organizations can build out the criteria they want to evaluate players on. They can upload their all their athletes. We integrate with some of the big players in the industry like Sports Engine and TeamSnap and League Apps. And then there's a check-in process. They can take photos of the kids. They can check them in right on their phone as they arrive for a tryout. And then that's also where they're going to get their rankings, and they can compare players and send reports out and team placement notifications. Kind of in the middle there is the coaches, who really just download our mobile app, and all they're doing is replacing the paper and clipboard that they're used to using with their phone. They're going to see the kids they're supposed to evaluate. They're going to see the criteria they're supposed to collect. Maybe they put rate these kids on a 5-point scale on, their shooting, passing, ball handling. And then maybe you want to do some measurables, how many free throws out of 10 they made, for example. And so the coaches, it's really simple for them. They're using their own device and they're just not using the paper and clipboard anymore. And so then the parent and the player kind of become the consumer of the output. They get notified of what team they made through the system. Maybe they get that feedback report or a nice report card at the end of the year with their club's logo on and some really nice comments from their coaches. And the coaches can even now do like a video evaluation. So they can turn their camera on their phone self-facing, record, hey, Susie, like awesome year. Here's some of the things I really appreciated about you. If you want to work on anything over the summer, here's an idea. And so it just, again, it creates that engagement really all the way through that chain. And as far as your second question, who uses it? We work with about, well over 500 organizations, and these are really all sports. Soccer, hockey, baseball, basketball, volleyball are all kind of our big ones, the major team sports. And, we're pretty much in all states. I think we're in 6 or I think even 7 countries now. And it's everyone from, we've got a few dozen little leagues all the way up to, we do like the Olympic development program for US Youth Soccer. And we do the national identification program for USA Softball, for a couple examples.
What other tools are being used right now by the coaches, the athletes in amateur sports?
Yeah, there's, I think the kind of big category that everyone has a solution for is, their website, registration, payment processing. There's a few big players in the industry that offer those services that I mentioned, Sports Engine, League Apps, TeamSnap, and there's certainly some others out there as well. But that's kind of the core functionality, right? You've got to have a website so people can find you and sign up for your programs. You've got to be able to collect payments. So if you're going to sign your kid up for AAU basketball, how do I sign out my liability waiver and put in my emergency contacts and pay you for the season? And so that's sort of the table stakes, and they all have something there. And then you'll see a lot in, tournament management, communication tools. So TeamSnap in particular is really known for their communications tool. So that's a coach having the app and being able to push a message out to all the parents and say, hey, there's a thunderstorm, practice is canceled today, or hey, we got moved from this field to that field. Just some of those typical day-to-day sports things that you need to be able to communicate really quickly with those families. And you don't want to be doing that over, one-off emails or, calling all the parents or anything. You can use apps for that nowadays. I'll say there's another category that's more related maybe to what we do, which is in, the athletic performance. There's certainly video, there's Huddle and some of those tools. There's a lot going on there where games are being recorded, and that game film can really be, in many cases, using, computers and AI that can be chopped up into highlight reels for each player. There can be analysis on, the speed of the player and how many times they change direction, or how many shots they took with their left foot versus their right foot. There's all sorts of analytics related to that, and even, extending that into wearables. So go to, baseball, for example, there's a ton of tools and radar tools for, swing speed and pitch analysis and all of that. So there's a lot of technology. And I think what you see is a lot of those things kind of start at the professional level just because the technology is really expensive. And so you see it at the professional level, and it kind of works its way down over time, just as in, I guess the simplest comparison would be flat screen TVs, right? The first ones were thousands of dollars, and now you can get a 60-inch TV for $700 or something. So that's kind of what happens here. It just starts at the top with the people who can afford it and have the staff to manage it, and then sort of works its way down into more the amateur side.
And, you said you're integrated with some of these other platforms through APIs. And so, in layman's terms, what does that mean?
Yeah, it means basically that we have the protocols written to move data in and out of our system. So we'll connect with, one of those other systems. Players I mentioned the registration, they've got to sign up for a tryout. So maybe the kid says, hey, I'm going to pay $15 for my tryout shirt and to, pay the staff to be there. And, it's Saturday at 2 p.m. Well, once that kid registers, we need to get them into Team Genius so that they can be evaluated. And so the catch-all solution is a CSV upload. You can just basically take a spreadsheet and upload all those players. But for the organization to use one of those tools I mentioned, they can basically sign in right through our system. They get a login for the other tool. They can see that registration list for the tryout, pull those kids in with a couple of clicks. And then we actually go the other way too with some of them. So once the teams are formed after the tryout, those rosters can be pushed back into something like TeamSnap, where then those teams are automatically created and the coaches can then go and communicate with those players during the season. So it just, it saves the customers a lot of time and kind of headache around, I've got to export, import. I've got to retype, this data from here over in this other system. The APIs just connect all of that and help us move the data around.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about technology, and the experience of using technology and media, and especially, your team, based on what you just shared and looking at the ecosystem of amateur sports, has really walked the journey of your coaches and in the leagues and just the staffs around the teams. And in amateur sports, it's not like they have huge front offices or back offices or team members. So as simple as you can make it for them, the more they're going to be interested in using the platform, because it's ultimately making their experience better and saving them time. And so I think in anything, technology, right, is supposed to be a time saver. So that's where I'm going to go into next, Chris, and ask you technology and, walking that experience and taking the time to lay out all the background APIs and, IT infrastructure to support it, right? And data security, et cetera. That takes time, which costs money. So that's why you ultimately, Team Genius isn't free or other apps aren't free, because it takes money to operate. So how did you go out and secure the funding? And what was that process like when you first were starting and had this idea before it was executed, right? It's one thing to have it and, it's working. You have a lot of people you've done. I think it's right here of how many player evaluations you've done. It is over, it's still counting, over 300,000 player evaluations, right? And so you've proven yourselves out now in your idea, but how did you do that before, when you were at 2 players evaluated?
Yeah. And really maybe this is a good point to kind of jump back to, a very brief version of the founding story, which is, my business partner, Todd, is a software developer and kind of a data and analytics guy by trade. Was a volunteer at his kid's soccer club, witnessed the tryout process and, all the pain involved, all the politics, all the time and many hours just keying data into spreadsheets and all of that. And, as a software guy, it's like, I wonder if I could build something that makes this easier. And all sports do tryouts, it seems. So maybe there's a product here. And, so he started building it nights and weekends, just writing a first version that was actually in Excel and was really just kind of the rankings and analytics piece of the tool. Would get some feedback on it, take it to sport conventions, talk to people about tryouts, and validating a lot of his assumptions that, yes, this was a problem and this solution was a viable solution for it. And, that was, several years before I ever even met Todd and got involved. And so, he had used all his vacation time. He had, taken a small loan to, pay himself while he took time off or have some, some money to fall back on while he took time off. And then when I joined him, we did the same. I did the same. I used all my PTO time for my current job, spent nights, weekends, all this time building this on the side. And then ultimately we both said, yep, we're onto something. Let's quit our jobs. And, we went, well over a year each without a paycheck. And and I think that allowed us, yeah. And, having Todd, having that developer, and I'm going to come back to that in a second, but, ultimately we did raise some money. We were, we had about 150,000 in revenue before we raised any money. And, and that process, of course, is tough. It was partly because there's not a lot of investors or venture capitalists out there who understand this market or are attracted to it in many ways.
Sure.
And so a lot of times we're having to sell the industry and where the industry is going more
Mhm.
so than our own idea. It's like, here's why this market is
Mhm.
interesting, not just here's why our idea within
Mhm.
it is interesting.
Yeah.
And so a lot of it came down to finding someone who really got sports and really got, the problem in the market. And we did that. And that person is, still on our board and is an active investor and participant in the company. And then his network and beyond, when we started raising, and now we've taken a couple of small rounds. We've raised about, we're working on a round right now, and we'll
Mhm.
close that soon here. And we'll raise about 2.3 million
Mhm.
total.
Mhm.
With some institutional, but a lot of angel investors who just love sports and say, "Hey, this is a
Mhm.
problem. I believe in you guys and the team. Let's go."
Yeah.
And I did, just to jump back quickly, I did want to touch on one piece of advice that I often give to people who have a startup idea. A lot of times, people have this perception that I have an idea, I'm going to go raise a bunch of money, and then I'm going to go test my idea. I'm going to go build it and get it into the market. And the reality is it rarely can work that way. Not many people are going to give you money to go pay yourself to go validate the idea. Like, you've got to find a way. And so the way is I tell people, a lot of times with a tech idea, naturally people want to run it by me often. And I say, hey, it's interesting. How are you going to build it? And they'll say, oh, I found, a firm overseas, like offshore or something, and I'm going to pay them. And it's not at all to say that that can't work. It's just that without having that technical co-founder, that developer who's really got skin in the game, a lot of different, it's just a huge disadvantage. And one way that kind of manifests itself often is you spend all the money, all your savings you had building a version one. Inevitably, you're going to get many things wrong. A lot of your assumptions are going to be wrong. And you might have a code base that can't scale and needs to be rewritten anyway, and you're out of money. And then you get tired and burnt out from the job, and you're like, oh, I got to pay myself. I'm going to go get a job again. And the idea dies. And so our advantage, one of our huge advantages was having Todd, having a developer who is fixing bugs nights and weekends, who is doing technical customer support in those early days,
Mhm.
who, we have an idea for a feature or something that could be better. And he's just like, oh, I'm just going to go build that this weekend because I'm excited about it.
Mhm.
And so I tell people, you got to have a Todd, find a Todd.
Yeah, you got to have a Todd, and it sounds like Todd is your CTO, and has the vision in mind of long term and how to build for scale. Then down to the granular detail of data security, or little user experience clicks and how to find things within the application or on the website. Whereas then you also have to have a Chris. You have to have a CEO. So I heard a rumor, Chris, that your first time CEO,
That's true.
but let's talk about that a little bit. So what has it been like for you leading a team, and what skill sets or what fears have you had to identify in your role today?
Yeah, it's a crazy thing, and I think you really grow into it. And I think there's a lot of ways I could take this question. I think one thing that's kind of interesting to note is that I wasn't the CEO the whole time with this company. So a lot of times what happens is, the original founder, whoever's idea it was, is the CEO, and there's, nothing wrong with that. That's typical. And I think there's a story here worth sharing in that, in 2019 is when I became the CEO, and we had been operating for a few years, and Todd was the CEO before that. And I want to be really clear here that this story is not meant to be a criticism of Todd in any way. Todd did a great job, and we went through this kind of process of, I think maybe in the back of our heads, just aligning with our skill sets. It probably made sense for me to be the CEO, and we both kind of knew that, but we worked so well together and everything was great. So it was like, let's not rock the boat here. So neither of us ever brought it up. Well, we had a meeting, and because I'm more the pitch man, the deal maker, that kind of thing, someone said like, oh, why aren't you the CEO? Again, not a criticism of Todd, only just seeing that like I had done most of the talking and did the pitch meeting and everything. And it's kind of like, oh, well, you're probably right. And so anyway, I didn't sleep very well that night thinking,
Mm-hmm.
oh man, I should probably talk to Todd about this, even though, things are good and I don't want to rock the boat. So the next morning I was like, all right, I just got to do it. So I pull Todd into a conference room and I say, Todd, this is tough to bring up. You've done a great job, but I think it might make more sense for me to be the CEO, just given my skill set and where we're going.
Mm-hmm.
And he looks at me and he goes, oh, and he just sighs with relief. I think it was one of those things we both knew, and we just hadn't talked about it. And so it was just speaks to, I like to tell that story to investors too, or potential investors, because
Mm-hmm.
it shows a lot of humility that this there's no ego here. Like, we need to do what's best for the company. And if Todd and I can, have a mature conversation about something like that, that can be, for many people, I mean, one of the biggest reasons startups fail is founder conflict. People go
Mm-hmm.
at each other and they disagree on direction, and egos get in the way. And I think that's a really big selling point,
Yeah.
when we're talking to investors. So thought that was worth
Mm-hmm.
sharing before maybe I get into
Mm-hmm.
some of the other things I've learned.
Yeah. Or they don't talk about it. And I think it was very mature for the two of you to get to that point, even though it took some time to have that tough conversation. I think that's something that, as we all grow in our careers, we learn, it's like a muscle on how to be able to have difficult conversations when they really need to be had. And it is a testament to your partnership, to the company, to the culture, where Todd's sighed with relief and said, this is best. And the two of you, as you can see with how the company has grown and where it's going, have worked so well together. So, you know, what would you say were some of the failures that you experienced along the way, Chris? Because, from the outside, I'll give you the example. We've talked to, say the CEO of Top Golf, right? And everyone thinks that Top Golf just popped up out of nowhere because they didn't know about it until it became a big thing and there was hundreds of locations. But it had a 20-year story, and no one had heard of the many ups and downs, right? So what were some of your failures? How did you learn as a company? How are you building? And then where are you winning?
Yeah, I think there's a few things that come to mind here. I think one of the, maybe not labeled as a failure per se, but one of the things that I think I've learned and gotten better at is, I think when you're CEO initially, you tend to, take it all on yourself and try to say, like, I'm the one that has to have the idea. I'm the one that has to have this clear, perfect vision of what we're doing. And to some degree that's true. But there's also, I think, one of the things that I had a hard time early on was just kind of letting go of certain things. And I don't want to say that I didn't trust others, because I did and I do. It's just that you carry it all on yourself. And so one thing that I've changed a lot in, over the last couple of years is kind of partly, the flip side of that is just, radical transparency with the team, and letting people share kind of the burden of leadership with your early team. We're 14 employees, and they know how much cash we have in the bank. When things were, we went through a really tough year last year, of course. Sports were just incredibly difficult.
Yeah.
And, I think by all accounts,
Yeah.
we got through it really well. We kept the team together. We ended up, still
Mm-hmm.
growing revenue about 30% last year. And,
Mm-hmm.
and I think if that year had happened a year sooner, I don't know that I would have let my team kind of share in that with me,
Mm-hmm.
in the sense that, hey, here's how much cash we have. This is what that means in terms of how much time we have to kind of figure out, how to get some sales back and keep things running. And I think just when I'm worried about something now, or I'm concerned about a problem that's on my mind, there's one school of thought that says, oh, don't let your team know, because you're going to kill morale and everyone's
Mm-hmm.
going to be, abandon ship, and they're going to go find
Yeah.
other jobs because they don't want to be around for it. No, I haven't found that to be true at all. And I've learned that, especially with that early startup team, like, they want to be in it with you. Like, they want to hear, like, what's keeping the CEO up at night, and they want to wrestle with those problems and those challenges. So again, maybe not necessarily a failure, but something that like I would have maybe internalized before. And now I've really brought, I think, my team into those challenges and those concerns that I have, and we all kind of grapple with them together. And I think it makes us stronger.
Yeah, I appreciate you sharing this, Chris, because you're being vulnerable with your team, but in a way where you're building trust and bringing everyone together. And, there is a transition, right? You weren't the CEO initially, but you were working there and you were part of the team. So when you came in, it sounds like, it was a little bit of a personal growth of establishing yourself within this new role and the team. So would you say that you ever experienced what people call as like imposter syndrome?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. And one of the weirdest things I think early on that's related to that is, calling yourself the CEO when you're like 5 employees, it's like, yeah, I'm the CEO of a 5-person company, and you kind of feel arrogant saying it, but you kind of have to, because, one of the things, is kind of a universal truth of early startups is just that, that carries a lot of weight with people. Your early customers are taking a lot of risk in buying your product. And, are you going to be around? Are you going to be in business next year? What if I put my neck out there and refer you to other people and then it goes bad, So there's something really to saying, hey, like, I'm the CEO, I'm going to take care of you, or, hey, you know who I am. And that's something that's really weird and definitely feels impostery early on when you're few employees and you kind of feel like you're, hoity-toity, kind of flashing this title around. So that was definitely a weird thing for me. And I think, and now the other one that really sticks out here is you have a tendency, and I know this isn't just me, because I've talked to other founders about this, or other CEOs, but it's easy to have a tendency. You look around in the market, you see other startups, even not in your industry, but you see other startups and you hear their news about their fundraising rounds, and you see a big headline from one of your competitors or something. And it's easy to fall into this trap of thinking everyone else has it figured out and you don't. And it's just not true. They don't have it figured out either. So I think that's something too that you really grow into as a CEO. Is you get more confidence, you get some more scars, and we acquired a company last fall, and it was like, I never thought I'd be doing that. And now it's like, okay, I know that process, and when that happens again in my career, I know exactly how to navigate it. Not that it won't have its unique challenges and circumstances, but if I were outside and I just see, oh my gosh, that other startup CEO just acquired this company. Wow, I don't know if I could do that. They got it all figured out. They don't. Your competitors don't have it all figured out either. You're seeing the cherry-picked headlines and the rah-rah news and everything. And so that's another thing where kind of early on you can be intimidated by that, or sort of crushed by this feeling of like, I'm the one who doesn't know what I'm doing. But most of us are just, trying to put the right team in place, and kind of, trying to stay humble about what we're confident in, and where we have conviction and where we don't, and figure it out.
Where's next? That's the big question. What's next? Where is Team Genius going today, tomorrow, and in the future?
Yeah. And this would be, we haven't talked a lot about this publicly yet, but really we're moving in this direction of, athlete development. And so player evaluations, of course, is a critical piece of that, but we're starting to look more at, kind of the simple fit here is we're really good at helping organizations collect performance and evaluation data and present it in a way that can tell a story, right? Here's the feedback from your coach. You're really good in this area, but here's something you might need to work on. Well, we've always talked about this idea of, well, I can tell you what to work on, but how do you actually practice that? How do you get better at that? And a lot of times the team training environments, practices, games, like obviously super important, but a lot of times there's not really the time or attention for kind of individual skill work. And that's an area we're starting to move into. So kind of marrying up our evaluation data and that side of athlete development with, maybe at-home training, creating content. We're actually moving a little bit into kind of the media direction where, we have an insane network of great trainers and sports people and, former professional athletes and all sorts of really great people who want to contribute, content and lessons and things that they've learned, almost like we're doing right now, but in the sports context. And so we have a really unique opportunity to bring that to athletes. And so really this transition from being solely like player evaluation into what I'd call a broader category of athlete development.
That's great. And how are you scaling this, and who do you need, and what do you need as a business in order to take on this next challenge?
Yeah, so we're about to announce the closing of a seed round. Should be about 1.3 million on that round, and of course we need capital. Really, in the grand scheme of things, we have raised very little compared to a lot of startups and a lot at our stage. We've always prided ourselves on being capital efficient and not just burning crazy money and risking going out of business tomorrow or anything like that. We've been really smart and careful about that. And so really that money is not the end all be all, right? It's just a tool for us to be able to get, more of the right people in the company. And, I'm really excited about, we've made, 4 recent hires and we're looking for another. And, they're just awesome people. And it's just like, that's what it is. It's just building a company that I want to work at, that our employees want to work at. And, if you have that and you have an industry and some problems that are interesting to work on and interesting to solve, that's really what it's all about. So the cash per se is really just kind of a means to getting more of the right people on board so that we can tackle these problems and ideas faster.
Mm-hmm. What are those roles that you were hiring for? What type of jobs?
Yeah. So, really this last round of hiring we did really spanned pretty much all functions. We hired a customer success manager, which, for the students out there, maybe haven't heard that title before. Mm-hmm. It's a really interesting blend of, customer experience, account management, and even a bit of sales in there as well. So they're responsible for, customer signs up. That person's going to really take them through, onboarding and getting set up, and then make sure they're successful, and also managing through to account renewal. So really interesting career path I would recommend looking at. So we hired a customer success manager, sales, we hired a director of marketing, and we hired another developer. So the next role we're looking for is a really interesting one. We're calling it a hockey content manager. So part of our strategy with, as I just answered, kind of where we're headed with the company is we believe we want to have a little more of that, specific sport expertise in-house. And so not just, going out and finding, there's, let's just take hockey, for example. There's, hundreds of thousands of hockey training videos on YouTube. Well, we really want to bring that person who can curate from the best and say, this is the program we want to run around, stick handling, or here's how you can, improve. Here's how you can prepare for tryouts this year at home. And here's a 2-week program. And so we're hiring someone who can really drive that programming in the training curriculum, but also run, affiliates, do community engagement with the kids who are training through the app that we're building. A number of other things. So this is a really exciting role, kind of blends sort of, tech and sport with certainly like media and community building, social media, those kinds of things.
Yeah, Chris, I really appreciate all that you've shared, and it's really enlightening for students and young professionals to see growth and development, of Team Genius and startups in this space. And so, we always end our podcast with just a word of advice from our guests. So the floor is yours, and then we'll exit from there.
I think the thing I would leave you with is that I find, and I share this advice whenever I speak with students or classrooms, is just that sometimes early in your career, especially when you don't have necessarily a lot of confidence or a lot of experience to fall back on, people are a little too timid or passive with what they want. I very much believe, and this is something that certainly takes practice and confidence, but ask for what you want, like make it known what you're looking for. And I think one of the best tools to do that right now is certainly LinkedIn. I think it's really incredible. Like, get your LinkedIn profile updated, have an image, write a little bit about yourself, put in whatever experience you have. And it's so hard to differentiate yourself as a student when you don't have a lot of work experience, right? Everyone kind of sounds the same with, I went to this college and I have this degree. And so I think the way you really stand out is kind of, a couple of things. One is, if you really, really want to be in sports and be in sports tech, I mean, start connecting with people and tell them your plans. Say, I love sports and this is really where I want to build my career. Here's what I'm doing to make that happen. Do you have any advice, or do you mind if I just connect with you here? I mean, most people aren't doing that. So I think it's just, there's some really simple things that you can do. And as a hiring manager, when I'm looking for roles or interns, we'll get, let's just say we got just for a round number, we got 100 applicants. Probably 5 of them actually sent a thoughtful note or bothered connecting with me or the hiring manager on LinkedIn. So I'm just saying there's a lot of room out there to just do a little extra to make yourself stand out. And the only thing I would add to that along the same lines is, just start a business, start a side business, a little hustle. Like maybe you dig photography. Well, learn how to build yourself a website, buy a domain, get yourself a nice looking website, put a little portfolio out there and say, hey, contact me for projects. Again, because if I'm a hiring manager and the only thing I really have to go on is, the college you're at and your degree, it's just, you sound like everybody else. But if I see the person who took a little initiative to reach out with a note, or took some initiative and figured out how to build a website for themselves, to support their hobby or something, that's how you stand out. So that's what I would leave you with.
And that's a wrap. Join us next episode with Joe Bertoletti from the city of Surprise, Arizona, and Jason Siegel from the Greater Orlando Sports Commission in Florida, where we discuss sports tourism.